Hello and welcome to tonight's episode of Old Romans Unscripted. Today we'll be discussing Cardinal Gregory permits but also hems in celebration of the Latin Mass in Washington, D.C. Pope Francis issues a new motu proprio making changes to Opus Dei. Persecution of Christians in Nigeria continues. 68 killed in the last 2 months. Today's contemporary martyrs. Bit of joy. Times of contemplative. Thought that causing offence will no longer be a crime. Article of the Newton history. Youngest of the cardinals is Vatican this week has banned investments in porn, weapons, and other products at odds with doctrine, and has also said that the synodal path in Germany must not create new structures or doctrines. This apparently has astonished German Catholics, though everything the Vatican has, although the Vatican has not everything. So there we are. So some interesting things for us to reflect and discuss, as well as, of course, our title this week, which just escaped my mind: Acta non verba. Actions, not just words. Greetings to Anne in Ireland. Bless you, Anne, and thank you. And to Stephen in Edinburgh. Greetings to you too, and to Peggy in Tennessee. Wonderful. Now, so to kick our discussion off, Bishop Kelly will be joining us, but later than usual. And I can see that Brother Stanislaus is waiting in the wings. Hello, brother. How are you?
Doing well, Excellency. Thank you. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Not too bad. How's your week been?
It's been okay. Yeah. How about yours?
Yeah. Actually, okay. Overall, it's been okay. It's been okay.
I was thinking as you were making your announcement about Bishop Kelly that I don't know if a lot of people realize that how busy he is during the week, and today is his only day to run errands and do things, and so a lot of times he's trying to fit us in to all of that. So I just thought I'd mention that.
Yeah, no, fair play. Bishop Kelly is a full-time hospital chaplain, and so and invariably on call. And of course, Sundays are Sundays, so Saturday is his only day off in the week to get domestic chores and run errands and things like that for himself. So we're always very grateful for his contribution, and we're very blessed by it. Okay, so let's whiz through some of these headlines. So Cardinal Gregory permits but also hems in celebration of the Latin Mass in Washington, D.C. So this is more of the same, really, following on from last week, and the Savannah, Diocese of Savannah, where the bishop there has been told by Rome to permit the traditional Latin Mass in limited offering until May 23rd. Various Catholic commentators this week have been asking the question: is the traditional Latin Mass going to be banned from May next year? And of course, we debated last week the potential situation in Chicago, which has far as I know, has not yet been resolved, although there was a little more information on LifeSite News earlier this week from inside sources. Brother,
Yes.
any thoughts about the Washington situation?
Well, I mean, it's not like anyone was surprised, like Wilton Gregory is some sort of fence-sitting guy. You know, it was kind of one of those things where like, okay, well, there it is. Except that I thought that he was so detailed in the way he laid things out. It seemed to have that sort of taste of, okay, this is the framework that everyone is going to be following or should be following. And that year, 2023, keeps coming up because that's also what was in the Detroit Decree, which for whatever reason either was overlooked or, I mean, I pointed it out because I thought, well, there it is right there, because Archbishop Vigneron here said same thing. You have permission for 1 year. In April of 2023, you have to come back to me. Now, that made it sound like, well, you know, we just have to keep coming back. But I think now people are starting to realize, oh, what that means is that we have 1 year to get in line. And I was thinking as you were speaking, how do you ban something that doesn't exist? Because according to, that's how I think they're going to go about it. According to Francis, the expression of the Roman Rite, as we call it, the extraordinary form, that doesn't exist. All he's doing is cleaning up a mess that other popes have made. And what exists is the one expression of the Roman Rite, period. And he seems to be making that clear, I think, in the motu proprio that I know you're going to bring up as well. And there seems to be this, the word that kept coming up, I'm sure it probably crossed your mind as well, was Machiavellian. The way that seems to be sort of spilling out of the Vatican, the way they're going to do this. Because as we have discussed on here for weeks, what do you do with the Ecclesia Dei communities if indeed the idea is to ban the Latin Mass? Okay, then what do you do there? But with Wilton Gregory in Washington, no news. I went to school there. I went to graduate school there. So I discovered the Latin Mass there at Old St. Mary's in Washington, D.C., which is where the Supreme Court justices who are Catholic and who happen to attend the Latin Mass, that's where they go, except it's not going to be there anymore. It's been Old St. Mary's in Washington, D.C. has never stopped the extraordinary form, ever, except they're going to have to now. And I'm not sure what's going to happen to it because it's a beautiful little church, but it's very poor. Really, the Latin Mass is the only thing that kind of keeps it going. It has a couple of Novus Ordo Masses, but they're not well attended. So I thought about them. Unfortunately, they're going to be axed out. But in a way, I kind of, I've watched Wilton Gregory his whole career. I mean, he's not that much older than I am. 10, 15 years, but still. So I've watched him all these years, and I've heard some things over the years, being a Black person in this country and then being made a bishop. It was a big deal when it happened back then. But I kind of appreciate that everything was clear in his decree, because that's the way I want it. It's like, if you're going to kill me, just kill me. Don't keep poking me and, taking away, plucking my beard a little bit at a time. Just pull it, take me out if that's what you're going to do. Be fair about it. Fight like a man in other words, is the way I want the Vatican to fight if they're going to fight. Because again, how do you ban something that doesn't exist? And that's how I think, I don't know exactly how they're going to word it, but I think that's what we're going to be looking at a year from now. If, I would say even if Francis is, whether he still walks the earth or not, that's the line of messaging I think we're going to be getting from the Vatican is when the Latin Mass does sort of disappear in the modern church the way they're intending, they're just going to shrug their shoulders and say, what are you talking about? Mass is right there. You know, Mass is right in front of you. It's happening everywhere. And people are going to be shocked and stupefied.
Yeah, I think, there's I think people have failed to realize, because of the indult, because of the witness of the societies of Pius X and Marcel Lefebvre. I think people have forgotten that the whole idea of the Novus Ordo Missae was to become the sole way, or the sole form of offering Mass for the Latin Rite Church, and that's why it's. I think it's beginning gradually to dawn on people, but that is, as you say, the hierarchy's justification, and Francis's justification, as he clearly made, as he clearly expressed in Traditionis Custodes. That's his thinking, and bless him, Benedict XVI. We can say he tried to make an accommodation for the traditional Mass, but note that even his language, the ordinary form and the extraordinary form. Even though he goes on in the same motu proprio to say, two expressions of the one rite, blah blah blah. Nonetheless, the ordinary form means the Novus Ordo Missae, meaning that is the form officially of Mass that should be offered in the Latin Rite. If you call something extraordinary, it means it's special, it means it's distinct from something else.
It's true, and I remember so well when I was with my former religious community, and I was sitting around with some of the other men at the breakfast table in Massachusetts, where our house it's still there. And the provincial came in. Now, the new provincial, mind you, at that time, that had just been elected. And we were talking about the Latin Mass because there were quite a few of us who attended the Latin Mass on a regular basis. And that's precisely the point that he made. He came up to us and said, "You're taking extraordinary the wrong way. Extraordinary means rare. You only use it in extraordinary cases, And I've never really understood that argument."
Yeah. Okay, so acta non verba. Our motto for this show: actions, not words. And we talked about this a little bit last week, but in terms of the traditional Latin Mass, what should people be thinking? So I'm not necessarily saying what people perhaps ought to be doing just yet, but they ought to be thinking, as we said last week, what is the future, and how best am I able to, how best am I placed, and how best am I able to support Catholic tradition going forward. Now, if May 23, the traditional Latin Mass is finally abrogated, or even if some accommodations continue to be made, we know that the direction of the current hierarchy is, we've just expressed it. They don't see any need for it. They want it gone. They don't give it any regard. So what should people do? Well, I would say myself, well, by all means, you could continue to support and attend those traditional Latin Masses in the diocesan and institute places for as long as they are able to continue. But as we said last week, you might also want to consider putting your money where your mouth is. And if you're committed to tradition and to seeing it continue, then actually the people who are doing that and whose sole reason almost for existing are ourselves, the Old Romans, and others like the Society of St. Pius X, who are holding out for Catholic tradition in the hope of the restoration that will surely come. But as is obvious, that restoration ain't going to come anytime soon. Certainly not before the end of this pontificate, and likely not before the end of the next pontificate, judging by the makeup of the consistory. Of the current number, that is, including the newly appointed cardinals, 2/3. So what is necessary for a 2/3 majority to elect the next pope, which is currently, I think, 87 of the voting cardinals. Pope Francis has appointed 83. So the likelihood of there being much of a change of direction, and certainly for the traditional Latin Mass going forward, let alone tradition per se, is very slim indeed. I know, brother, you have similar thoughts.
I wanted to ask you a question to maybe spur some thought, because I get this idea of, okay, what do we do? How should we continue the fight, continue preparing, whatever, as you've set us up. And it made me think of, like my time at Assumption Grotto. And people can say what they want about how you interpret maybe what the bishop is saying, or maybe what he's not saying. I know what I did. And I can't say that I knew it was going to happen, but I kind of felt the walls closing in. And so immediately I thought, I'm not investing any more money into this, because it's a money pit if you keep doing that. Now, no one believed that at the time, and it's been 4 years since that time, but it's happening now. Father Perron invested millions after he was removed, to redo the parking lot, to redo some very needed things there at Grotto, because his thought was, well, there's no way this can happen. I'll return as pastor eventually because I'm innocent, all that. 4 years later, his money is gone. He had to drop the lawsuits because he ran out of money. And he basically redid that entire parish, an old stone parish built by the Redemptorists in the late 1800s for the archdiocese. That's going to be used for Novus Ordo parish, I'm sure. Okay. So my argument is, if he would have known, which maybe he might have, shouldn't he have taken those millions and maybe invested in another building and said, okay, I can't say Mass publicly, but I'm going to be here, people, and you can come see me or not. But when things are all over, at least we'll have this. Now, I know that sounds like a great plan after everything is done. But you see where I'm going? So how do we determine how much to do and where? Because to me, and I'm sure many of our regular viewers know, they know that I'm going to say, hey, it's a sinking ship. Don't invest any money. When someone else might say, no, keep giving to the Latin Mass here because they need to keep existing, keep giving over here. And I'm going to say, if they're tied at all to Novus Ordo, take your money out, because eventually it's going to be gone. It's going to be gone. Not gently pushed away, not made room. It's going to be gone. And people, they don't believe it.
I mean, we've reflected on this before about the future, as you said earlier, of the Ecclesia Dei communities. Now, for example, we know now that the Shrine Church and the plant in Chicago is wholly owned by the Institute of Christ the King. So the only thing that SUPICH can do is withdraw their faculties from exercising any priestly ministry outside the confines of their church plant. Strictly speaking, one could argue that his authority might also extend even toward certainly public celebrations of the liturgy. And the question facing now those people who have been financial supporters and benefactors of the Institute's work in Chicago is, and the question for the Institute itself, will they continue to remain there, even if SUPICH does withdraw all faculties so that the priest can offer no public ministry, no public sacramental ministry? Will they not? And bearing in mind that that is the Institute's headquarters for the American province, will they continue to staff it, to man it, and to run it as a private religious institution effectively, and continue to offer mass as they are, privately, technically privately rather than publicly? And will the people continue to financially support them to do that? Those are questions that people need now to think about and to ask. Now, conversely, I would also say that money would be better spent given to people like the Institute or the FSSP, where the traditional Latin Mass and liturgies are exclusively celebrated. Because often some of those churches do belong to the Institute or the Society, some don't. But whilst they can operate, and they are striving to preserve and maintain witness to tradition, even within the institutional church, I would say, continue to support them. Because there may come a time when they realize that Marcel Lefebvre was right, and they may engineer themselves into a position or even a situation where they likewise have to make a stand like the SSPX did, and come out from under the hierarchy altogether, and in which case they will need all the funds they can lay their hands on. We can't rule that out as a possibility, because if Rome continues to make their life impossible, I would say the vast majority of those men and women who have committed and dedicated themselves and their lives to those institutes and societies will want to continue with tradition. I think the vast majority will want to continue with tradition. There will be, of course, the politicos, the wheeler dealers among them who will say, "Oh well, we'll come to some sort of accommodation. We'll come to some other arrangement. We'll try and sort things out." I think the writing's on the wall. I mean, it may be that in the first instance, Rome turns around and says, "Right, from May 2023, no more diocesan TLMs. No more. The only places that will be offering the traditional Latin Mass will be the Forum Ecclesiae Dei communities. So wherever they're serving, that's the only place that it'll be available." They may turn around and say that. It wouldn't surprise me if they did. But even then, I would say the writing is still on the wall. That's not a comfortable position. And let's face it, Rome is not against how can we put it, letting people go. Rome is not against letting people go. Now, if the institutions, the societies, if they can become financially self-dependent, and I suspect that, as I said, the vast majority of them would want to persist in tradition, and if the vast majority of faithful would continue to support them in that, then that may give them the confidence when things get too much to say, right, okay, we've got to separate ourselves for the time being. That may be the case. That's a possibility. Who knows? But this is, these are things that people need to think about. These are things that people need to think about. And in the first instance, these places offer beautiful liturgies. They offer good pastoral ministry, more or less sound Catholic teaching. I mean, the only issue is that they have to accommodate the Novus Ordo, but otherwise in the main. But there will come a point where the blind obedience will be challenged. And at the moment, of course, that's their whole thing, blind obedience to Rome. But as we know, blind obedience is not true obedience.
Well, I mean, there's an argument there, and I think some of the saints of the past, they've argued that idea of blind obedience versus, and it's a Jesuit idea, mind you, the idea of debating obedience dependent upon data and who's saying it and all that. And, some of the older, more mystical saints might argue for blind obedience. However, blind obedience was always when all things were equal. You had a pope working, a holy bishop, holy priest, holy monks, so everything's working as it should. And maybe there was a time of the church when you could count on that more so than now. I'm trying to think of what gives me pause with this is something that continues to irk at me in regards to Novus Ordo intermingling, is that's it. That all these years they've clung to this idea that, well, we are, in a sense, true or better because we are in line with Rome. We're doing what Rome is allowing us to do. You guys are schismatics because you've gone off on your own, and how dare you? Okay. Well, now they find themselves having to make a little bit of the same. Maybe it reminds me, I think, a little bit. Well, I don't know, and I'm going to lean on you again, Archbishop, about our own Archbishop Matthew. It's not anything I've read, and I've shared this with you, but I kind of think that Archbishop Matthew struggled with this most of his life, because you and I, well, I do. I can only speak for myself. It is a very, very difficult thing when you are so in love with the church, with our Lord, with everything, and you grow up with that. And it's not just a matter of habit, especially being a religious. And then you find that you've been lied to. And I can only use what I've come to know, that I was lied to. I was tricked. I was given all kinds of things. I was taught by men, uneducated men, well, maybe poorly educated men, wrongly educated men who thought that they had new ways to understand things, new ways to present things. And to a modern mind and to a secular mind, we kind of go, oh, it is kind of nice and bright and shiny. Let's go look over here. And then as we get older and we're looking for meat, we're looking for something real, spiritual food. And we realize that's not it. And what you're showing me is not it. So what's wrong? And you go through all these years, and thanks be to God, you discover the Latin Mass. And for a while you exist on both because you're told you have to. And I know for me, I think I was mentioning earlier when I discovered the Latin Mass in Washington, D.C. And, I go to Novus Ordo during the week, but on Sundays, when we were allowed to go wherever we wanted, I was off to Old St. Mary's to go, and I spent all day there at that parish, hanging out, just being around and soaking it up, because that's how it's always been. Of course, none of us were there at past ages of the church, but the stained glass, the Stations of the Cross, the statuary, the candles, the people, the habits, everything was visual to help the people, to catechize the people, not as a form of education, but as a form of help, because remember, most people were not educated, and so you did have to had to show apples. 1 apple plus 1 apple is 2 apples. So that's what I think we've lost: the simplicity of the loveliness of our faith, and where the Novus Ordo never goes.
Yeah, and of just being able to live Catholic lives. I mean, I was watching. I've been watching this week. I don't know how it started, but I started watching all these A Day in the Life of a Seminarian from all the various seminaries, and frankly, I was appalled pretty much by everything I saw. But there's one quote that really kind of sums it up. So there were these young guys. They finished their day. They had free time, so they were going to the gym. And they said, we like to remember prayer intentions while we work out. And then one of them said, and our suffering while we work out, that really helps us to unite with Jesus and his suffering on the cross. Well, I almost threw the moniker against the wall. I mean, and these were not first years. Now, if that's their understanding, if that's their approximation, appreciation of what the suffering of Jesus was like upon the cross for our redemption, if that is what they are kind of thinking of the new Mass and the presentation of the new Mass, what does that tell you? I mean, and all the way through every single video I've seen, the big question throughout in my head has been, where's the sacrifice? Where's the sacrifice? Now, I know some people will say, oh, well, they're going to be celibate, so they're sacrifice, and they're going to give their lives, so they're being sacrificial that way. Well, hold on a minute. If you're called to the sacred ministry, and particularly to the priesthood, and it's a celibate ministry and priesthood, and that's your vocation, well, you're not actually sacrificing. If it's, God calls you to that which he has, purposed you for. There's no point of discerning vocation and realizing vocation. So if you are genuinely called, then it's not a sacrifice to be celibate. And looking at and they've modernized the seminaries. I mean, they're more like some of them are sort of shared houses. Some of them are dormitories, but not in the old-fashioned sense. They all have their own room, etc. All the food is laid on. Most of them, they had one of them had a rota where once a week we have to take it in turns to serve each other. meaning walking around the hall pouring water. But they weren't. Now, in stark contrast to similar videos by the FSSP, by the Institute, and by the SSBX, etc., where the seminarians are doing everything. They're doing the laundry, they're doing the cooking, they're doing the cleaning, they're doing the repairs, they're doing the tailoring. They're doing everything, as well as studying, as well as coming to the church, to the oratory at least 5, 6, 7 times a day. Whereas, in the Novus Ordo seminaries, they may go 3, maybe 4 times, and the 4th time will be optional. So they'll go for morning prayer, so they'll have the office of reading, then they'll have mass. Later on, they'll go for evening prayer, and then night prayer is sort of optional. Sometimes the community comes together, sometimes they just come together in groups, privately, whatever. The contrast is incredible, and I'm thinking, these guys, and I'm thinking, this is why the church is in the state that it's in, because if there's no sacrifice, there's no love. There's no, the nature of the love that is God is charity, which is sacrificial love. Now, if everything is laid on for these guys, the gyms were incredible. Let alone the nice dining room, the comfortable communal lounges, and all the food that's laid on and prepared by others for them, and so they just turn up and eat and then go. And I'm thinking, and when they enter into a parochial situation, what's going to happen then? Now, you and I know some parishes are very well off and look after their clergy, so some of them will, continue in that, that sort of comfortable way of living. And again, where's the sacrifice? Bishop Kelly's in the green room, so let's bring His Excellency on to join us. Hello, Bishop Kelly.
Hello, everyone. How are you all?
How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. I was listening to your tales of modern seminary life, which unfortunately has been true for many years now, which is very sad. I hope you can hear me. I'm running the air conditioner here today, but yeah, I hope you can hear. In a sense, it is. There is no sacrifice, but that's been missing for a while. I'm reminded of the old joke or anecdote about the bishop that goes to visit one of his rural parish priests in Ireland, and he goes out into this very rural parish, and he says, "Father, could you give me a rundown of your day?" And he goes, "Oh, of course, my lord. Now I get up at about 6:30 in the morning, and I have a look at the breviary, and then I'm in now then for the 8 o'clock mass, and I have a say at the mass, and then the housekeeper has the breakfast ready for me after that, and then I go into the parlour and I have a look at the morning papers, and to be honest with you, my lord, after that I slacken off for a bit." It's this sort of notion that of a privileged lifestyle where you really don't have to do anything. That the only sacrifice you have to make is going to the gym, and that you'd be well looked after at a well property parish if you can keep your nose clean and the bishop appoints you there, so you throw the line. I mean, where's the radical nature that these people keep talking about? I mean, these are their words. Where is this evangelization? Where's this smelling of the sheep? None of which really exists. It's all words. And I mean, we see day after day the lack of pastoral care from the Pope to the cardinals to the archbishops and bishops, the way they treat people under their care. And it's all about maintaining the status quo. The whole thing has been going on for years. The cover-up of clerical abuse, monetary impropriety, all of that was covered up to maintain social status. And it's quite sickening when you hold it up to the mirror of the Gospels, where, you know, they were living at the behest of others, begging for their food, moving from town to town, and if they reject you, dust the dust off your sandals and move on. You know, it's incredible that they think this is any sort of reflection of sacrifice of the life that Christ has called. And now there are many good people who do. There are many impoverished parishes and good pastors who muddle through and make the best of what they have from meager means. There are many religious orders who still, to this day, rely on the benevolence of others, and still some who actually still beg their food, and are filled with zeal for passing on the gospel message. But for the mainstream, it's not. It's quite embarrassing when you hear it and when you look at it. I don't know how you watch several of those videos. I probably couldn't have made it through one.
Well, you know, I was holding out for hope. I was hoping out for hope. Okay, so let's move on. So, a new motu proprio issued this week, ad charisma tuendum, issued by Pope Francis, concerning the prelature Opus Dei, and essentially what he's done is to alter or attempt to alter their constitution, and there's still going to be a personal prelature, but not necessarily with a bishop as their superior. But unlike the personal prelatures of the ordinariates, where former Anglican bishops, upon their reception into communion and reordination, can then request to wear episcopal insignia, i.e. mitres and etc. The new constitution for Opus Dei will only make the superior protonotary apostolic, which is not a mitred. It's not a mitred Monsignor.
It used to be.
Used to be, but not anymore. And also, what's interesting, very telling, is the fact that this he requires, interestingly phrased, but basically he wants Opus Dei to adopt these new articles or amendments to their constitution. Now that's rather heavy when decreed by a motu proprio. So that's not calling in, the leadership of Opus Dei and saying to them, I've been thinking, I think, this should change and this should change. And, no, he's actually issued a motu proprio saying that this is basically going to happen. And you guys need to make it happen. Brother, any thoughts about that?
Well, this is the roadmap, or at least, I thought it was genius of them to go after Opus Dei first, rather than the Ecclesia Dei communities, because they're kind of dismantling. Yeah, they're kind of dismantling, because Opus Dei being a personal prelature to the Holy Father. Well, what if the Holy Father says I no longer need you to do this? Then doesn't he have that right to no longer make them a personal prelature? If he has the right to create them, does he not have the right to say, well, now you're under our dicastery now. You can still remain as you are, with these changes, and those of you who don't like it, you're free to go. Just like they've done over the centuries with every other community that had to change their constitutions, there's always this time period where those who are unhappy do not have to stay. They'll be allowed to go to another community, or their vows will be dissolved. So I think that's what he'll do here. And so then what happens with Ecclesia Dei? Well, it makes it easier for Ecclesia Dei. Now with Ecclesia Dei, it says, well, wait a minute. There is no extraordinary form anymore. There is no need for these communities who at one time did this for the church. Thank you. Your job has been done. Now go and be good Roman Catholic priests. If you do not want to be priests anymore, that's fine. We will release you from you being priests and go back into the world. I think it's going to be that simple.
Yeah, I do get the sense of it's a warning shot, or it's a closure of the option for SSPX. When there was talk under Benedict about the personal prelature for the SSPX, and in fact, before Benedict, there was talk of it with Marcel Lefebvre. Sorry, there's a cat up here that's about to come into frame. I'm just going to let the cat come in. So that, they promised him a bishop, and there was no bishop coming forward, so he took matters into his own hand, etc., and we all know the history of that. But now it's saying to groups like traditional groups, the Ordinariate, and Opus Dei, is that no, this is not acceptable anymore. We all have to go to the mainstream novice ordo or nothing. And then this week he throws out a sop on the other side. He's so unpredictable. I mean, I wonder if he still has his marbles, but he throws out a thing to the German bishop saying you can't change doctrine. So apart from women priests and gay marriages and that sort of stuff. I mean, it's typical Jesuit stuff. And brother, you are right. In fact, I think in the church the only major society that had been disbanded was the Jesuit order. It didn't stick.
Unfortunately.
There you go.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I'm almost done trying to understand this, because I think it's gathering more sort of mania. Like these things are popping up out of nowhere. I mean, I know he doesn't like the thread, but Opus Dei. I'm not a big fan of Opus Dei. He's back again. No, you got to go. I'm not a big fan of Opus Dei at all, but they've always been loyal to the papacy, probably to the extreme. And I don't know why he's going after them. I think it's because they're seen as, but they're novice ordo traditionalists. They're not TLM people. They're not, they like the novice ordo. They're big JP2 people. Okay, they have the odd hair shirt and a wire girdle. But I don't know why he's going after them. So who's going to go after next? And I saw a little picture of Bishop Gregory's, and I'm assuming you've already discussed him, but he's put the hammer down in DC, Ala Supic. Just really being nasty to people who just want to express their faith, and not being nasty to the people who, who make a mockery of the faith, like giving benedictions with guitars and just, stripping Christianity of any form of Christianity, and making it a new world religion, all that sort of stuff. And somebody said, I read on one of these blog things, talking about Gregory, isn't he worried about his salvation? And somebody replied, no, because they think they're all going to be saved because of universal salvation.
Yeah.
So then he's not worried at all. He thinks everyone's going to go. Unfortunately, it's a rude awakening, and I don't wish that on any soul whatsoever. It's gone into Looney Tunes land here, and it's like it sounds like it's the last dying throes, the death rattles. Where the snake will bite anything as it's dying, because they've seen the writing on the wall. They saw the success of the TLM movement, and they want to try to suppress as quickly as much as they can, as they know that they're losing favor. It's quite pathetic, and as their numbers dwindle, and there's some sort of remnant. In fact, sorry to say, we're back into the late 1970s and 1980s when we have to talk about remnants now again. But it'll burgeon again. It'll come back, because you cannot hide truth. These people think you can. You can change truth, and you can. But again, it's about the perennial message of Jesus Christ, and if they try to suppress that, it'll never happen.
Yeah. I mean, Anne in Ireland makes a valid point. Do they think they are too orthodox?
Yeah,
I think that is probably the case. People like Opus Dei, as you say, they're not traditionalists, but they're sort of, they're conservative.
They're conservative.
They're conservative.
Yes, yeah.
And there are, there have been negative connotations about Opus Dei, so I imagine there's a wanting to address that as well. And for sure, arguably there's been problems with them, as there have been with the legionaries, with the
Neo-catechumenate, yeah.
Neo-catechumenate, etc. Sort of, extremist. So yeah, it'll.
Well, Excellency, I wanted to, because Bishop Kelly had brought up, you were talking about this what's going on and what the Holy Father had said in Germany, and I agree with you both, but I wanted everyone to recognize that what the Germans will do is they'll say, well, there's no new doctrine, but there is developed doctrine.
Sure.
And so doctrine has developed in this way, which is precisely what they've been doing.
They've already said that, yeah.
Exactly, and that's what I think Francis was saying. Remember to develop doctrine. Don't define doctrine.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting what the Vatican didn't say.
Mm-hmm.
So So the warning shot was, you're not allowed to create new structures and new doctrines, blah blah blah. But what it didn't say was, you've got to stop talking about ordination of women. You've got to stop talking about same-sex marriages. You've got to, none of that was mentioned.
It's almost like it was like Vatican II.
Well, it's almost like don't spoil it by getting there too fast.
Right. And then all of it,
there's a process we've got to go through, guys. We've got to have the synodality first,
and then we'll have a synod.
Introduce all this stuff because all the accumulated reports from around the world of all the synodal way, they're all saying, they're also asking for ordination of women and blah blah blah. So, hold on, Germany. Let everybody else, say it as well, and then at the synodality, we can say, "Oh, look, everybody says the same thing." Therefore, I mean that's
the way
it's going.
Of course,
That is the way it's going. And folks, I really don't think it's an exaggeration for us to suggest that, and because we've seen this, all this buddying up to the Protestants and the Anglicans and so on and so forth. All of them, of course, of the once mainstream have gone progressive. They've all had they've all had schisms. They've still got ongoing internal issues, chaos, and that is coming to a Roman church near you. As
if you haven't sat back and learnt.
Yeah. I mean, it's like as soon as you introduce the ordination of women, you will schism. You will schism, and this is why I say what I was saying earlier about not completely forsaking the institute and society and all the rest of it, because that will be when they finally realise that actually no, this blind obedience monarchy is not cutting it. We've got to make a stand, and that means we're going to have to step away, like the SSPX, like the Old Romans. We're going to have to step away and preserve things for some future restoration, because, and I'm sorry to say it, but all this rubbish will happen first before the restoration. All this rubbish will happen before the restoration. So, brace yourselves, because I reckon by 2025 there will be women deacons.
Okay. And then, I do want to say too, though, on a positive note, although it is waning, and I agree with you that, that I think, they've already set their hand to a different plow and they're not looking back. But I was heartened this week to see that snippet. I'm sure you both have seen it. It's been on Facebook and all of the other social media things, of the nun. I believe it's in Naples.
In Naples, 82-year-old nun.
And the way
she was walking down the street with her shopping, and a photo shoot was going on for a fashion house, and there were two women, two girls, who were about to kiss.
They were kissing, I think.
Or they were. Well, I think they were. Well, whichever. They were either about to or they were. But anyway, little sister comes up and complains to them, "Why are you doing this in the street?" And pulls them apart, and then goes off.
And she says, "This is of the devil."
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure she's been disappeared by Francis, in his opinion, but what a brave thing to do. And we often talk on this show about how Christians Catholics can reclaim the public square. There was a great example of a religious sister reclaiming the public square. If you think you have the right, to be doing this in the middle of the street, I also have the right to tell you not to do it, and it's of the devil. Yeah, and they scoff and laugh at her and all that sort of stuff. But you know, it's I was heartened to the fact that somebody still has the fortitude to stand up to it and say it. I don't think I would have said it. I would have walked on by and put my head down.
I mean, the trouble is, of course, is that nun is 82 years old. So this is not a sign of restoration of order.
No. I'm not saying that, but I said there are still things there. And
oh yeah, well, and
things
likewise, at the top of the program, as we said, one of the headlines from the Times of London this week reported that the police conference has written new guidance for police forces, saying that to offend someone, they should no longer regard as a some kind of criminal activity. And I think, and I've said this before recently, I think common sense is gradually beginning to come back. Because previously the police jumped on the whole hate crime incident bandwagon, and I think there have been so many wastes of time for both police and for lawyers and everybody else. The beginning, common sense is beginning to seep in, and they're beginning to say, actually, this is not why are we going around knocking on somebody's door to say to them, you've really upset somebody on Twitter, or you've really upset somebody on Facebook. It's when actually they could be going out arresting thieves and criminals and stuff, and hopefully this will bring about a return to recognizing that sometimes the perpetrators of crime aren't actually victims themselves, but they are perpetrators.
No, but it's the thing that we all, I've said this several times. Modern society, everyone's scrambling to be the better victim. It's like, no, I'm more victimized than you. Oh, no, you don't understand. My feelings are hurt. Imagine going after, somebody said, a crossword on Twitter where they could be doing actual police work. There used to be a thing in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. The police had these large armored, they're basically armored vehicles. They look like tanks. The army was green, the police were grey, and then they started this hotline when hotlines became popular, and it was called Crime Stoppers, and there was a 1-800 number under it about call if you see something. But one of them was parked up for 5 minutes, and somebody sprayed painted on the bottom of it, you guys couldn't stop traffic, never mind crime. It's like, let's return to policing, but no, I agree. I think people are starting to tire of it. And here in the United States, there's this movement to defund the police. There was a thing recently here in the city of Chicago about pursuit tactics by police, that if it was a minor crime, the police shouldn't pursue the criminal on foot unless it's something like murder or rape, but or theft. And they can also do it for theft. But if somebody smashed a window or stole a car, broke into a car, the police are no longer supposed to pursue them on foot. It makes no sense. If a policeman or woman sees crime happening, shouldn't they pursue the criminals? Isn't that traditionally what policing has done? To protect and serve, to make sure the fact that they're serving the community while protecting them and arresting and stopping this criminal from carrying out a similar offense. But I guess not anymore. But people are reacting. People are voting with their feet. They're moving out of these cities that have these ridiculous laws. They're voting against these politicians who support the defunding of police. I mean, if you don't have police, who's the death? You know, who have you got to go to? Where does the citizen turn if something happens? You know.
Well, that's why we have the Second Amendment here. That's what the Second Amendment was intended to do. You know, we have a right to protect ourselves because the state may not always be there. But you know, that is where we're going. I hope everyone knows that.
Well, not just that the state might not always be there, but the state might not always be right.
Yeah. Yeah. Archbishop, I was wondering because I've seen a lot of this chatter on different sites, and I know you've talked about this a lot in our conversations, and I've heard you talk about this a lot because I've seen the suggestion come up more and more as we see more and more things happen coming from the Vatican of going to the Orthodox. Why not check the Orthodox out down the street? Why not go to this, And I let out this deep sigh every time I see that. And of course, so many uninformed Novus Ordo Catholics who might go to the Latin Mass every now and again just for whatever reasons. They think, well, yeah, I'll just go down there because that's beautiful too. That's very nice. What would you say? How would you respond to that?
Well, I mean, it's a very complicated question, and I think we really, the individuals need to think about, what actually is their motive for going. Now, if, for example, it's a question of ascetics, so if it's a question of, well, the Novus Ordo is rubbish, and if they take away the TLM, then I'll just go Byzantine. The question they surely must have to ask themselves, and I hope if they have a spiritual director, he will say to them, well, that's no reason to change right. And I think part of the problem that people don't appreciate is the reason why, irrespective of questions of theology, irrespective of questions of politics, the reason why there's East and West is wholly cultural. The reason why the liturgy, the Byzantine liturgy, is distinctive from the Latin is because culturally and environmentally they grew and developed in different situations, and with that comes a difference in approaches, spirituality, with communal consciousness, etc. And these are things that you can't just adopt. The woke brigade go on about, cry about cultural misappropriation. When somebody is white and then acts like a black person. Likewise, if you're a Latin, if you've been brought up a Latin Rite Catholic, it's not easy to just say, oh well, I'll just go to the Byzantine Rite and everything will be okay, because the whole thing is different conceptually and experientially. So that the mysticism in the East is different from that in the West, etc. Now, that's not to say that these things cannot be understood. Of course, they can be understood. They can be appreciated, and indeed, further proper study of them allows us to see huge commonalities between these two different cultural expressions and manifestations and developments of Christian spirituality and approaches to theology. But it's but it's not as simple as, oh, well, I'll just, I'll be Latin Rite today and I'll be Eastern Rite tomorrow. And then with regard to going over, actually becoming an Orthodox, a Greek Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, whatever. Again, there's all of that cultural stuff, but also the fact that you may well be jumping out of the frying pan into the fire, because Orthodoxy is similarly in turmoil, and in fact, the difference is that their rebels are even more vociferous and take action. But this idea that Eastern Orthodoxy is in harmony is absolute rubbish. Moscow is not talking to Constantinople. Alexandria is not talking to Moscow. Alexandria and Jerusalem and Alexandria don't always get on. Antioch always kind of sits on the fence. But then you've got Bulgaria, Romania, Serbia, Ukraine. The idea that all these patriarchates and autocephalous churches are united is bunkum. Now, they may or may not be in communio in sacris with each other. In the main, they are, meaning that in the sense of, if you're Russian Orthodox and you find yourself somewhere without a Russian Orthodox church and you go to a Greek Orthodox church, you can receive communion or make communion or attend and hear the Divine Liturgy. That's true. Communio in sacris basically exists, and there's some unity in that. But if you're wanting to leave the Roman communion because of the politics and because of the progressivism in theology and the rest of it, you ain't going to find peace in Orthodoxy. I mean, only yesterday I was reading Sister, what's her name? Larkin, begins with V. She's quite a vocal Orthodox commentator. She's a nun, and she was saying she gets invitations all the time because she's a vocal nun. She gets invitations all the time to speak about women in Orthodoxy, and she makes the point that it's not her place to, and in many ways she can't, and that the experience of and that the progressive and secular values and ideas that many Orthodox women now have are in fact alien to Orthodoxy, just as we would say they're alien to Catholicism, to Western Catholicism. So, the Eastern Orthodox, for sure, on the whole, in the main, doctrinally, fairly sound, but it's a whole different, which I'm not saying it's wrong, because I'm not saying that, but it's a wholly different approach and understanding and development and expression of the same faith, which, you see, even within Orthodoxy themselves, they complain, for example, that the situation in North America and the situation in England, in fact, in the diaspora anywhere, in Orthodoxy, there should be one church, one national church. There should not be half a dozen ethnic parishes and jurisdictions. And they can't get that sorted. So, they can't get that sorted within a nation.
I think that goes to the heart of what you're saying. I completely agree with you. And I've known people that have gone across to Orthodoxy, and I've known several that have come back. And the reason being, like you say, in Britain and in the United States, we have all these different jurisdictions. We've got the Russian Orthodox Church, we've got the Orthodox Church of America, we've got the Greek Orthodox Church, we've got the Serbian Orthodox Church, etc., 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 the Ruthenians, and it's because they're national churches. And they're, what you said, they're culturally national. I mean, if you go to, it's the same liturgy, but if you go to a Greek Orthodox church, and then an hour, well, not an hour, 2-3 hours later, you go up the street to the Russian Orthodox church, same liturgy, but it'll feel smell, and experience completely different. And I think what happens to Westerners, Latin Christians, is the fact that they go there, they see it as a refuge because they're fleeing from this, and rightly so, they're fleeing from this nonsense and this chaos that's been kicked up. And they go over there, and they're happy for a couple of years, but then it doesn't sit right because it's not part of their culture. Latin and Western Christianity is influenced, but I don't agree in everything that Pope Benedict said throughout his years. I'm still saying, despite the media reports this week, that it's part of the fabric of Western civilization. So anywhere in Europe, the Americas, etc., have a Western expression. And that's rooted in everything. Like, even if you weren't even brought up Christian and you were a convert to Christianity, you would be somewhat familiar with Western Christianity through things like jurisprudence, law, music, art, etc., etc. So it's part and parcel of our culture. And I think people start to miss that. As you said, we can learn, and there's nothing wrong, but it's just different. It's like if I went to Saudi Arabia, it wouldn't seem very familiar to me. Their customs.
That's right.
It would be alien. It is an authentic expression of Christianity. They have retained apostolic succession. But the trouble is, and this goes vice versa, when Eastern Orthodox Christians go to the Latin Church, they often find themselves feeling strange and a little bit off, often. And the nature, again, of the Orthodox Church, for example, me as an Irishman going to a Russian Orthodox Church, I'll never be fully accepted because I'm not Russian.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And we have the similar thing in the Latin West. I mean, there's a Latino parish, a Polish parish, a German parish, a French parish, etc. All these things are different, and even as a Western Catholic, and especially in North America, where I would say these differences are exaggerated compared to. I mean, for example, if I'm used to, I've visited Spain. I've visited Spain several times for years, and I can perceive. Even then, I perceive that the Spanish Catholicism is a different flavour and expression from that of English Catholicism or French Catholicism. But in America, where again you had ethnocentric parishes for in their foundations for years that were wholly Polish or Italian or Irish or whatever. Just because you were a Catholic wouldn't mean that you would be automatically comfortable or accepted.
Yeah, and it was, I'll tell an answer. I don't know how true this is, but I've been told, and nobody's corrected me. I was told by an old priest of the Archdiocese of Chicago. There's a slight difference in the fact that the liturgy was always in Latin. Now, the sermon, of course, would be in German or Spanish or Irish or English or whatever it happened to be. But there were two parishes, and anyone who's from the Chicago area knows exactly where they are. One of them's now closed, and I'm not going to say any more. That used to, one was German and one was Irish. And they both had their Mass in the morning at 10 a.m. And the two parishes were like 2 blocks from each other. And they would get out at the same time, and there would be scuffles and fights in the street between the Germans and the Irish. And the Archbishop, as it was then, before Chicago got a red hat, calls the two parish priests in and says to them, look, we've enough trouble with the WASPs and anti-Catholicism, and now we have you guys fighting in the street. Like, can we at least agree to stagger the Mass? Somebody start at 10, somebody start at 10:30, and then this thing won't happen. And they're like, oh, yes, Excellency, that's a great idea. It's a great idea. So then he asked them, who's going to change the time? Oh, I'm not changing. And apparently they get into a fist fight in the Archbishop's office at the cathedral. There is that, and that has been part and parcel. But it's never, and there are differences, you're right. French Catholicism is very different from Italian, very different from Spanish, very different from Protestant English, very different from Irish Catholicism too. But they were united in the sense that the liturgy was in the same language, and there was a certain familiarity, which does not exist in Orthodoxy, because there are different languages. And the fact that the churches are national by intent, and that was really never the case with Catholicism.
I mean, just about languages, I think it's important that some people don't realise, for example, we often speak about sacral language, and Latin, of course, is recognised as a sacral language because it's not the ordinary franca lingua of the street. But likewise, people don't realise that the old Slavonic and the old Greek that's used in the Orthodox liturgies is not what's spoken by the people in the street. And as many people as would say to us, oh, well, nobody understands Latin anymore. There are as many that say nobody speaks that kind of Greek anymore, or nobody speaks High Slavonic anymore. It's so literally, there's. I would say, going back to your question, I would say find a TLM.
Yeah.
Find a TLM.
Yeah. Stay the course.
And stay in your lane, because at least then you're in fellowship with people of like culture, where you'll have the same mind, same understanding, the same approach, the same appreciation of things. And if it all goes, tits up, well, then you're all together, though. Whereas, if you start taking yourself off to foreign lands, literally almost, you'll sink, and you'll sink because your faith won't be fed. Because this is where cultural aspects are important, because in order for our faith to be fed, in order for us to keep to receive continuing formation and catechesis, etc., we need to be able to relate to what we see and what we hear, and to an extent arguably there's something about a kind of innate sense that we have, an innate reaction and response that we have to things that are of our culture. When you and there are some people. I'm a bit of a chameleon. When I was in Italy, I sounded like an Italian. When I'm in Spain, a little bit like when I speak French, sound comparsa French. And I like the different customs. I like the different traditions. I like the different cultures and the food and the way of doing things, etc. I'm a sort of cultural chameleon in that respect. But at the same time, in conversation, you realise that there are differences in approach and perspective, etc. That would mean if I lived here, it would take some extra effort on my part to live my Catholic faith personally. Yeah, okay, corporately I can go down the road and go to Mass, but I can't at Mass, I can't after at Mass, I can't buy automatically English prayer cards or English translations of this, that, or anything else, or you know, and they all have, even villages have their own customs and stuff. You know, it's and if you don't have the language, and if you don't have the same cultural perspective and upbringing, it can be very alien, and that can be disconcerting. And you know, people can lose their faith.
I couldn't agree with you more. And you know, as an immigrant to the United States, as Oscar Wilde famously said, two great nations divided by a common language. You know, of course, I had the language. I speak English, and some Americans do. But when I moved here, I was fine at the beginning, but after a year or two, I got this there was a certain amount of unease, and I couldn't quite figure out what it was. And I was trying to ascertain, what's the problem? So, I was in academia at the time, so I was teaching, and so I had time to think about things and look at it. But I eventually figured out, and you know, I was more at home with the Polish and the Hispanics, and that's what gave me the clue, is the fact that America is founded on the cult of the individual. It's me, myself, and I. I have the right. You know, claim your land, go west. You know, it's all that sort of frontiersmanship notion of America. Whereas in Europe, certainly in Ireland, it's about community. It's about the village, the parish, the town, you know, your county, your province, and you know, you look at Europe would fit probably twice into North America, but you have all those different cultures, like we were talking about, and different languages, and different ways of doing things. You know, from Norway to Greece, you know, you couldn't think of anything as different, but they all have. So, but once I recognized it and figured out what it was, I was much more at ease because it just was. But when I couldn't figure it out, it was uneasy, and I'm like, why am I not fitting in here? You know, why are people talking like that? Why don't I think like them? And, you know, what's going on? And so it is. Why bring that upon yourself? Where you can just make it easy and stay in your lane.
Well, try your best to. I mean, you know,
Try your best. Yeah.
We all appreciate these are ridiculous times, and you know, but as I said, you know, again earlier in the program, it's all about sacrifice. Now, if that means you've got to travel 2 hours or more for Sunday Mass to get to a traditional Latin Mass, so be it. You know, if that means you can only go once a month, or bi-monthly, or tri-monthly, or whatever, so be it. But at least, you know, you can. But none of that stops you from praying the Rosary. None of that stops you from reading the Catechism yourself. None of that stops you from, you know.
No, look, it's not. It's just as you said when I joined the program, and I'm aware of time. I do have to go. About, you know, what they think about sacrifices for Jim. You remind me of, you know, my grandmother. She grew up in a village, and there was no Catholic church in the village. She had to walk, I think it's 5 or 6 miles every Sunday to Mass and back. I thought nothing of it. Like it wasn't an imposition to do. That's what you did every Sunday. You walked, and sometimes they would take their shoes off to save the shoe leather. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's in Wales. I mean, you know, both for Catholics and Protestants, before everyone had a motor car and everything, people had to walk miles on a Sunday morning to go to chapel or mass.
Yeah, this is back in the
Nothing of it.
This is back in the 1920s and 30s century. That's got nothing of
Yeah.
it. In the pouring rain and the ice and the
Yeah.
snow and the sun, and it's just that's how you went, and you would never miss. There was never an excuse, whether it's weather or anything else.
And I think, again, you see, that person has to ask themselves, what is my motive? What is my motive here? Is it because I'm just seeking my own comfort? I feel uncomfortable here, so maybe if I go over there, I'll be more comfortable. Is it, I'm after for my own convenience? Oh well, the Novus Ordo 2 miles down that way is rubbish, so I'll go to the Byzantine, which is only 2 miles that way. Again, we always must ask ourselves, where is the sacrifice? What is God calling me to? Because God is always calling us to sacrifice, because that is the nature of His love, and we are called to become like His love. So, what is the sacrifice? If there's no sacrifice involved, chances are it's the wrong thing. It's the wrong thing. So I always say to people, there's God's way, the sacrificial way, and there's our own way, the selfish way. And every decision we make, we have split seconds to decide sacrifice or self. And invariably we choose self. And the person who is sincere about their faith and about their spiritual life always needs to check themselves in that fashion. Is it sacrifice or self?
One of the enduring images, and you often see it on old vestments or at altars, and you hear it in the Latin liturgy. It was written by St. Thomas Aquinas. Now, it is a legend. It's a complete legend, but it's the Pia Palicata. It's this thought that the pelican would pierce its own breast to feed the young. No, it's false. But as a symbol, it's true. As a symbol of sacrifice, as a symbol of Christ, as a symbol of the Eucharist, it is absolutely true. And I love to see that when I see it on old altars in the marble, or I see it in old vestments, and when I hear it at liturgy, I just that image of the sacrificial nature. And the question is that I often think when I see it, how willing, and it's a self-check, how willing would I be to pierce my breast in order to hand on that which is true? Now, I often come up wanting, I have to be honest. But that's part of the part of the pilgrim way is to work on that, It is sacrifice. And the only way we would achieve that image of the pelican is the fact that we start in small ways of sacrifice. And it's about dying to yourself. It's not about feeding the ego, it's about feeding others. And I think that's what the image means to me. So we need to regain that, because the modern world completely rejects that.
There was an excellent meme. I'm just going to see if I can find it quickly. Oh, here it is. An excellent meme that appeared this week. And I wouldn't necessarily have put it quite this way, but it says, Christianity is about helping others and controlling yourself. When it becomes about controlling others and helping yourself, it ain't Christianity. Now, there's a lot of truth in that.
There's a lot to it, and I agree with you. I wouldn't have necessarily put it quite like that, but
I wouldn't have put it quite like that. But it's always about sacrifice, and the nature of sacrificial love is that it must be manifest. It must be expressed. The whole reason that creation exists is because of the charity between the three persons of the Trinity had to be expressed, had to be manifest, had to grow, had to go somewhere. and likewise we're charged to make known and extend and share the love of God in Christ upon the cross for our redemption.
And it's inbuilt into the human psyche as well, because I will say that listening, I don't know why I do it, but I listen to these things in the States. But they're talking about there's been Planned Parenthood in Arizona and somewhere else that people are getting sterilization because they fear that they can't access abortion, which to me, and they had this lady answer as well, I want to protect my career, so I'm going to get sterilized if I can't have abortion, which refutes the argument that, well, what if somebody was raped or incest and, these abortions only occur that, no, it's not. It's about selfishness and convenience, and it's become a form of contraception.
Well, I mean, we already know 99.9% of abortions are convenience.
Yeah, but you don't hear that.
No, they don't want to tell everyone that, but it's true.
It is true.
Less than 1% have anything to do with rape and all the other exceptional circumstances. Less than 1%.
Yeah. Everything else.
All of them are for convenience. But and there are numerous GPs and medical, doctors and practitioners, consultants, etc., will tell you that the generally the need for an abortion is extremely remote. There are very few situations, especially today, in which a mother or a baby might lose their life.
It's about career and convenience often. But while the West is obsessed, with that, we have to remember we're so Westernly centric and we're wrapped up with ourselves, which is part of the problem with the West. There are still people of many different faiths around the world, mothers and fathers, that, in the notion of sacrifice, will go without a meal so their children can eat.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was watching a fascinating program yesterday, actually, about a particular tribe of Indians in India. I can't remember their, but they were the royal blacksmiths originally, and they got disinherited from their ancestral land. And in fact, they took a vow that they would be nomadic until their king returned. In the program,
just like us Jacobites.
Yeah, and in the program, exactly. And in the program, it said, when India had its independence, Prime Minister Nero went to the ancestral city and declared there, assuming the kind of king role, and told them, well, you're released from your vows. And all sorts of promises were made to facilitate their return to their ancestral lands, and to take on a settled life. But of course, governments being governments and all the rest of it, it's never happened. And now they're even considered lower than the untouchables, which in India's caste, system is beyond the pale. So, but they, some of them are so poor, and there was a mother there with children, and she didn't eat. She made sure that they ate, and if that meant she couldn't eat, then that meant she didn't eat. And there are, it's again, because Westerners tend to be so self-obsessed. People, we totally take for granted the, for want of an alternative phrase, privileged situation that most of us enjoy. I mean, these guys, for example, when there's drought, they don't have water, and because they're poor, because they're basically wholly disenfranchised by society, they have to. They're left out of the rationing for water. I mean, but unbelievable. You know, and it helps put things into perspective.
No, it really does. I mean, you know, it's sort of as I was saying, there is an innate thing to human beings, and I think it's wrapped up theologically as the fact there is and has always been, and we may have temporarily, I hope, forgotten it in the West, but this notion of sacrifice, that mothers and fathers that go without food to feed their children, but the very fact that when the incarnation happened, when God became man, became one of us, and everything is like us except our sin, it's quite natural that he would feed into that sacrificial nature, that he would give his life ultimately, that we might know salvation. And it's something that's in tune with the human mind. I mean, if you think over the centuries, how many people, you know, I'm thinking right now off the top of my head, but of the Irish famine, of the mothers that died so their children might eat another day. You know, and in India, people not of Christian faith who still are doing that in our present age. You know, you can think of many examples over the years and how decadent we've become in the West, that we find, rather than, you know, skip a meal or indeed even die in a famine situation that our children might live, we'd rather kill our children for our convenience. It's just, you know, it's very sad.
It's the topsy-turvydom of today.
It is.
It's the topsy-turvydom of today. But remember, folks, acta, non verba. Actions speak louder than words. And that's so true when it comes to manifesting and living our Catholic faith. And with that said, I'm going to bring things to a close as we have reached that time. And a benediction in Latin.
Okay, you have to do that one too. Sit nomen Domini benedictum. Auditorium nostrum in nomine Domini.
We fece caelum et terram.
Benedictum omnipotens Deus, Patris et Spiritus Sanctus, defendet super vos et manuus Deum. Amen.
Amen. Smashing. Right, well, God bless you all. We're here next week.
I may be in a different place, but I'm probably available.
Cool. Brother?
Yes.
Same time, same place. Excellent.
Same time, different place.
Or, well, technically different time, but the same place. Anyways, somebody was asking about domestic church. Yes, there are some new programs that will be coming up soon. One exclusively for the patrons on Patreon, and that will be a daily program. So look out for that, but you have to sign up if you want to see that. Otherwise, until next week, it's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from them.